And it's also 6:05, so yeah, we'll get started. And before I begin, a quick disclaimer: this workshop is like pretty new, and that it's a really new format that we've never tried before. It's highly experimental, so feedback is appreciated. Like either on Discord or like some forums after it ends. So how this is going to work is a lot of the previous workshops.
First of all, welcome to live design.
Oh yes, sorry, you should
probably say welcome.
Yeah, welcome to live design. And again, this is a pretty experimental workshop. So a lot of previous workshops, how we did was we'll have like, slides, PowerPoint slides, and say like, hey, this theorem, this is like theory 1, this is like theory B, this is how design works. This is like more like hands-on practical stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a graphic design on Figma. And I'll just like continuously work from start to finish. And the idea is you'll get to see like the process of making a design from scratch from start to finish in like a single continuous session. I don't know why I ran out of breath there. So the way it's going to work is I'm just going to basically screen share myself working on Figma, and I'm just going to talk out loud what I'm thinking at the moment. And if you guys, that being said, if you guys have any questions, feel free to just yell it out and say like, hey, Tomoki, stop, like, can you redo what you just did? Or like explain what this is all about.
Or otherwise, I'll also be monitoring the chat so I can ask those questions if you want to just type them up.
All right, so without further ado, let's start screen sharing. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to make an iPhone 12. So when you have a prompt like this, a lot of times when I see like when beginners of graphic design try to make like a phone, a lot of times I see something like this. So like kind of captures like the general outline of like a phone. You can see the screen, you can see like the little camera section and all, but it doesn't look as good, right? It's just like it looks like a slab. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you how to make this from scratch with like all the proper shadings, lightings, etc. So let's get started. So the first step is to collect reference images. I feel like a lot of people actually skip this, but it's really important to have reference images because like, at least I don't know about you, but at least I don't know like what iPhone 12s look like to the exact detail, like where the buttons are and everything. So I will definitely need a reference image to remind myself what an iPhone like really looks like. So with the reference images, first going to start off by making a slab because all smartphones are like pretty much slabs. So I'm going to do that and round off the corner and do that. I'm not really going to worry about shading too much. I'm just going to capture the general outline for now. All right, so I'm going to look, and iPhones are pretty round, like rounder than I thought. So I'm going to make it pretty round like that, but not too round because it obviously looks off like that. I'd say this is a good amount. And now what I'm going to do is duplicate it and paste it in Spot. There we go. Oh, I should probably hold Alt. Okay, so the thing about the iPhone is, if from far away, it just looks like a single slab. But if you zoom in really closely, you'll see that first there's the outer metal rim. And then there's like black part. That's the edge of the screen. And then there's a screen. So there's actually 3 rectangles we need to make. So one is the outermost metal part, and next is the outer edge of the screen. So that's what I just did now. Did I make it too thin? No, I think it's good. So then paste it in place again, make it a tad bit darker, and there you go. And reduce the radius. See out there, it should look like that. Yeah, I think that looks good. And now I'm going to add the camera. That's like the camera module. All iPhones have that. So I'm going to round off the edge like that. Oh, too round. Yeah, there you go. And if you also look closely, you'll see that where the camera module meets the outer frame, there's also like a slight roundness to it. It's not like a perfect perpendicular angle. So to simulate that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a vertex like that. Yeah. Should be able to do that. And this, yeah, it looks really janky, but it should work. I'm going to click that and give it a slight roundness to it like that. Yeah, and I'm going to lower it down. And there. And I'm going to make the same color as the edge of the screen. Ta-da! Oh wait, it's sticking out. Ta-da! There you go. now we have the camera module on the screen. Okay, so this is where things get, oh, I see a lot of comments. I'm gonna check it real quick. Oh, looks like
okay,
2 times speed.
They're just
Yeah,
complimenting.
yeah, thanks everyone. Okay, yeah, so going on. This is where things get interesting. So one technique I use a lot in my design is to make the edges look really round. So the problem with a lot of vector design is that things look really sharp, right? Like right now the phone looks like it has like a really razor sharp edge. But if you look closely, I mean, the new iPhone's like relatively sharp, but if you look closely, like the edge is not like razor sharp, it's slightly rounded off. It's like, you know, sanded off and it looks nice. So it doesn't hurt to hold in your hands. So we want to simulate that. And one way to do that is to first duplicate. So when there's like another copy of this rectangle, and I'm going to add a layer blur to it. See, that's all blurry now, and that's too much. So there's just 1 pixel blur. And I'm actually going to select the first rectangle and the blurred rectangle and do a mask, which does this. I'm going to move it over again. And there you go. So now I see it looks like the edge is round, unlike before. That's like a cool technique I use a lot in my designs. And let me put it out like that. There you go. All right, I think that should do it. Maybe I made it maybe I should move it to the left a bit more, so it's a bit more visible. Yeah, there you go. And maybe make the blur like 1.5. Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell at a distance, but the detail really kicks in when you like zoom in a bit more, which is cool, I guess. All right, so what shall we do next? I think at this point we can actually start applying the colors. And the thing about colors is, hold on first, let me add a linear gradient. So usually lights come from the top, right? Because the sun is at the top. So the top should be a bright color. And actually at this point, let me start applying, not just make it a grayscale, but applying colors. So just gonna go with the reference images and make our phone blue. So I'm gonna add a bluish color like that. And I think Apple calls their blue Pacific blue, which is a pretty tricky color to simulate, but I'll try my best. So I'm going to do that, and the side is a bit more darker, and the bottom is obviously pretty dark. One tip, by the way, is when people like when beginners do graphic design, I see like when they make a gradient like this, like say I make a blue here and I make another blue down here. I see what a lot of people do is they just change the brightness of the color, so they just make it like darker blue, but that actually doesn't look as good. Colors look nicer when you vary the hue. So in this case, instead of just making it dark blue, I actually add like a slightly purplish tint. And this is kind of like a jank example, but if you like optimize the color well enough, you'll see that varying the hue gives it a more like colorful color palette. It looks like there's a lot more going on. The design looks better automatically. So that's what I'm doing right here. Can add like a bit more variance to the color. That. And the reason I'm adding this is also because since the iPhone is metallic, it's theoretically reflecting off its surrounding environment like a mirror. It's just really hard to see because it's pretty a matte surface. But assuming there's like, objects around this form, like, I don't know, like a tree or like a building, it's like technically reflecting those things on the surface. So to kind of simulate that, add a bunch of different random colors as if there's something that the surface is reflecting. So let me play around with this a bit more. I don't want to spend too much time because it'll just bore you guys out, but wait, wait, hold on. Let me go back to my own example. What did I do wrong? Colors seems a bit off. I think I might have made it a bit too saturated. Let me tone it down a bit. Yeah, there you go. That looks more right. Make it a bit of bluer hue. Yeah, there you go. And there you go. All right, so now to the blurry part. So obviously this is facing the front, so it should be brighter than the sides. So that's what I'm gonna do. I think that's bright enough. All right, and the edge of the screen. Actually, at this point, what I'm gonna do is first I'm going to click subtraction. So now it's just a ring like this. And actually, let me put this aside real quick. I'm going to do a subtraction and, oh, what did I do? Okay, Okay, there you go. Subtraction and then the union. So now it's a single piece now that I can move around. And it makes it a lot easier to manage. So then I can add a linear gradient and make it dark blue like that. And there you go. Then I can add this back in. And I'm just going to make like dark blue screen for now. I'll make little adjustments later, but for now, this will do. Excuse me. And at this point, I realized I might have made this actually a bit too narrow. So I'm going to stretch it out sideways a bit. Yeah, that looks more right. Okay, so now I'm going to start going into the little details. So first, actually, what I'm going to do is actually bring this over because I still feel like the colors are a bit off and I don't know what I did wrong. Okay, I think I know why. All right, so I'm going to go back to gradients a bit. I'm going to go adjust the colors further, actually. So again, the top should be a really bright color like that. There you go. And I'm going to add a little dark color. So the thing about making metallic surfaces is when you add like a bunch of colors in your gradient like this, it like automatically looks slightly more metallic. It's just how it is. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to add a bit more blue colors, different hues of blue colors here and there to give it a more metallic finish. Okay, that does that. And move this a bit up. I think I would have made the colors a bit too purplish. I'm going to make it a bit more blue hue. And I think that will look better. Yeah, I think it's working now. There you go. Same thing for this. And finally this. I added like another different pitch of blue here. Okay, yeah, I think that looks better. All right, so now what I'm going to do next is select this rectangle and paste it in. And right now it's in the mask group if you look to the left. So I'm going to fix that by moving it out here manually. And then remove the fill and add a stroke and remove the blur effect. So now I have like a black edge going along the outer rim of the phone. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make this white and then make it a linear gradient. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a diagonal gradient like this, then add a bunch of colors in between and vary the opacity. So some are more darker white than others. And what that does is if you look here, you'll see that it kind of makes it look more shiny, right? It's like a little glare on the edge. And let me adjust it. Yeah, I think that. Yeah. So when you zoom in, it looks a little bit weird, but when you zoom out a bit more, it looks like there's like a nice glare going on the edge. And it makes the phone look more realistic and convincing and pretty, I guess. It's always nice when things look pretty. I'm going to add a bit more here and another glare to the bottom right there. There you go. All right. And speaking of glare, I'm actually going to simulate screen glare on the bezel right here. So the way to do that is, remember I said like when you vary the color, things look more metallic, shiny. So I'm actually going to make this part a lot more brighter than the rest of the bezel, and see that kind of makes it look like the screen is a bit shiny. I guess the effect isn't as convincing right now, but later when I apply it to like the whole screen, you'll see what I mean, hopefully. All right. Okay, I think it's looking out pretty cool now. So I'm going to move on to the camera actually. Sorry. So if you zoom into the camera, actually, I think there's a better reference image. I think it was this one. If you zoom into the camera, you'll see that camera isn't just like a single circle. There's like a lot more going on. So I'm gonna do this first. I'm gonna make it diagonal because the phone is like slightly facing sideways, so it's not a perfect circle. It's like a squished circle. And then if you look closely, camera again isn't just a circle. First, there's like a little dent. It's kind of like a little hole. And inside that, there's a lens, and the lens itself is really shiny. So there's like a lot of cool effects going on. So first I make the outer dent. That's the black part. So I'm gonna actually make it a linear gradient. and make the top darker. It's the opposite because it's caving inwards, not outwards. So it's the opposite. The top is darker and the bottom is brighter. Okay, let me make adjustments. And I think, yeah, I think that does it. And I'm also going to make the lens now. Actually, it's probably easier to just duplicate this and do this and make it a solid fill like that. There you go. And right now it doesn't really look like a lens, right? It just looks like a weird circle at the bottom of a pit. We want to make it look more like a lens. So the first step to do that is actually to add another fill. And this time we make it a radial gradient. And I move it up here and see it's already starting to look a bit circular. So this is a really neat trick you can use a lot, actually. When you add a radial gradient like this, things generally do look a lot more circular. And let me tone it down a bit because it's too strong. Not circular, like probably spherical. That's probably a better word for it. And I think I made the color 2, not blue. Yeah, there you go. And if you look at the reference image, there's actually more going on. Since lens is like a really shiny surface, it's reflecting the surrounding environment. So it's not just like a black sphere. There's like a lot of these blue shiny stuff going on. So to simulate that, what I'm going to do is, this is just pretty much straight off the reference image. I'm going to add another radial gradient. This time I'm going to make it pretty big, like that. And I'm going to, hold on. Where'd it go? Oh, it's probably the other way around, yeah. Okay, why is, oh, forgot to make it radial. There we go. So it's radial now, and I'm gonna tone it down. Yeah, I think it's working now. So what I'm gonna do is, hold on, move this over here and this over here. Gonna make the innermost color transparent, then the outermost also transparent, and this inner part's gonna be blue. And I'm gonna tone down the brightness a lot, actually. And then do this, and then, yeah, tone it down like this. Yeah, there you go. And also change the color of this. So yeah, there you go. Looks a bit more natural. And I'm gonna add another radial gradient, and this is actually gonna be the same. It's just on the other side. Like that. Scale it up. Oops, what did I do? There you go. Add another bright color right here. And another darker blue right here. You know, it's like a finishing touch. I'm gonna add a little white circle at the top, kind of simulate the glare that a typical shiny surface has. And again, zoomed in, it looks a bit off, but when you zoom out, it looks a bit more like an actual lens with all the radial gradients going here and there. All right, so now with that out of the way, all I have to do is add the speaker right here. The speaker, there isn't really much going on. It's just like a little oval with a dent, but here he goes. So that's the speaker, not the speaker, but like, actually it is a speaker, never mind. Gonna round off the edge and make it darker than the surrounding surfaces. And I'm gonna shift it sideways, move it back 1, and that means I can make this brighter and move it back 1, actually, the other way around. There you go. And there. Now it looks like it's denting inwards because of this little thing. All right, so that is actually mostly it for the phone, except I just realized I forgot to add the buttons here. I'm gonna skip this one because I'm lazy, but I'm gonna make these 2 buttons here. And the way I'm gonna do that, this is actually a bit trickier than it looks. So first I'm gonna make a vertical button, right, obviously. And I'm gonna round off the edges. That's kind of similar to what we did just now. The part where it gets tricky is that, first of all, we have to consider more lighting because the button is a bit more prominent. So I'm gonna add a color right here, and then I have to add a rectangle here, so there's like no weird gap. Yeah, so then I'm going to select these two and union it. So now it looks like this. I'm going to send it back and add a gradient. Linear gradient, so the top is again brighter. And the bottom is darker. And in between, I'm going to add a bit more neutral color. There. And as with the edge of the screen, I'm going to copy this, paste it in place, remove the fill, add a stroke, and I'm going to make this 0.5. And make the color white and make it linear. And this will, again, simulate the glare on the edge of the button, like so. It's really hard to get it right. Yeah, I think that works. Yeah, I think that works. And another thing to note about the button is that around the button, there's like a little hole, because buttons aren't just like slapped onto the surface. There's like a hole around the button where the button fits into. So now we want to make that. So the way to do that is to duplicate the button, make it slightly bigger like that, and move it to the right. Move it back actually. And there, nests right there. I'm going to make the color darker so it actually looks like a hole. Actually, in our case, I think we can leave it like this. I think that's enough detail. So I'm going to group the button and duplicate it downwards. And ta-da, we have two buttons now. I guess if you really want to be stringent with like details, we can also add this band right here. It shouldn't be too hard, actually. We just like make a rectangle like right here, I think it was. And then make it slightly lighter tint of blue, and then reduce the opacity, and ta-da, there you go. All right, so now the final step is to make this background like this cool background that Apple always makes. We all think it looks cool. We all love it. Now it's time to make it in Figma. No need for Apple anymore. Anywho, so this is obviously a bit tricky. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to make a frame dedicated to this background. I'm going to make the background dark blue because it seems like that's what they're using here, I think. And I'm going to put the circle over it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make the fill another radial gradient. We use a lot of radial gradients in this workshop. Make the inside transparent, and then make the outer rim bright blue. And you can see where this is going probably. And one thing to quickly note is that Figma has, when you make a gradient in Figma, I noticed it goes from color A to color B on a linear progression. Oh, sorry, I think that's me. Excuse me. All right. And sometimes that doesn't look as good. Like for example, you see here, it looks like the dark blue. Oh, sorry, hold on. Excuse me. So it looks like the dark blue suddenly becomes light blue, and we want like a more smooth transition. And if actually Adobe Illustrator has this feature, we can make like little tweaks to make this transition smoother, but unfortunately Figma doesn't have that. So I'm going to have to do it manually by adding another color right here and then making a tad bit more thinner, and see the transition like slightly got smoother, not by much, but it's good enough for now. So that being said, I'm going to add another radial gradient, and this one is going to be dark blue. Oh, it's not radial. This one's going to be darker blue, like that, and the outer rim is going to be more like emerald color, like that. And I'm going to move this to the bottom, like that. And I might have made it too strong, so let me tweak the colors a bit more. Oh yeah, that is a very dark blue. I should lighten it up a bit. There you go. And add more colors so this transition is smoother. Okay, yeah, this is very hard, by the way, even for me. Yeah, okay, yeah, there you go. Now it looks a lot smoother. You can see it's starting to take shape. So I'm gonna actually make a fresh new circle. And since there's 3 circles in the background, as you can see right here, I'm going to make another one. I think it goes, yeah, it's around here. And it seems like the second inner circle is a bit more greenish tinted. So I'm going to delete the fill and add a radial fill. And seems the inside is like dark blue again. So I'm not really going to argue with that. But the outer rim seems to be a bit more greenish tinted. So I'm going to make bright blue again, but again, a bit more with green tint this time. And do it like this. Should make the inner actually a bit more lot thinner. Add more colors. I might have made it too thin. Let me smoothen it out a bit. There you go. You see, there's like a really green, bright green area on the top left of this second inner circle. So I'm going to add that with yet again another radial gradient. Yeah, this one is like radial gradient galore. So this should be, I'm guessing, blue, but transparent. And this should be really almost like emerald color. It's almost actually green. So I'm going to make it really bright. That, and just the scaling a bit. Or actually, I just noticed it might be better to do it like this. And flip it. Yeah, like that. Okay, then add more transition areas like that. And adjust the radius a bit more. Actually, maybe add another gradient to highlight the edges more. It's going to be just white, and the inside's going to be transparent. And there. Yeah, I'm not going to worry too much about details because, again, speed is kind of the emphasis here, sort of. So I'm just going to move on to the final inner third circle, which is going to be the one right here. And this one is like the brightest out of the three, it looks like. So I'm going to add a radial gradient. Y'all know the drill by now. Move this, make this white, make this transparent. And actually, this should be a bit more yellowish. Let's make it a bit more yellowish this time. Make it brighter. And I think I can add another radial gradient. And this one's going to be pretty similar to this one we just did. So it's going to be here, here. The inside is going to be more bluish and transparent, while the outer rim is going to be more greenish and brighter. Like that. Yeah, I think, yeah. I'm going to stop here actually, because again, I don't want to waste too much time just doing the background, but this should be good enough for our purpose right now. So I'm going to select this, group it, and I can bring it back over here, which in our case will become our background. So let's actually click on this and add one final background radial gradient. And this one should be pretty dark in the center and the light blue in the outer rim. And it's not looking as good. Why is that? Okay, yeah, let me just adjust the colors a tad bit more. Hold on. Okay, yeah, I think I got the hang of it. Just make this a bit darker. All right, so now what I can do is click on this, duplicate it and place again, and then click on mask, and that will fit our background snugly into the screen frame. And I'm just gonna squeeze it a bit, actually. Let me actually make a copy of this first. I'm gonna squeeze it horizontally because, again, the phone is facing sideways, so we wanna take that into account. It should look more like this. All right, so one last final touch is to add a screen glare. So, as actual screens are made of glass, so they actually kind of have glares. And if you want to be like 100% physically accurate, what you want to do is like assume there's like, again, buildings, trees, or whatever around the phone, and like actually draw the buildings and trees as a reflection. But obviously that's going to take way too long. So a really common technique seen, especially in like cartoons, is just draw like a really big bar across the screen like this, just to kind of like tell the audience like, hey, this is a shiny surface and there's like something reflecting. Don't know what, it's just a bar, but there is something reflecting it, thus it must be a shiny surface. So that's what I'm going to do actually. And then if you remember, that's also what we sort of did for the bezel right here. And without further ado, let's make this bar, and we're going to vary the width so there's looks a bit more interesting. I think that's good. And what I'm going to do is union it and then add a linear gradient that runs across it like this. You can see what I mean when it says like she looks shinier this way. Probably see the effect kicking in. Okay, and I think that's good. So what I'm going to do is make a copy of this rectangle right here, actually. Hold on. This outer rectangle, there you go. And I'm going to click on this, and mask it so that the white bar is like only across the screen and not like kind of spilling out the edge. So, okay, so let me group this. There it goes. And one last little touch I want to add is add a shadow, because right now it just looks like this phone is levitating in the middle of nowhere, and that's not really a realistic scenario. We want to make it look like it's like actually against some backdrop. So I'm going to add a dark blue rectangle like that and round off the edges.
Hey, Tomoki, could you quickly pause and just explain how masking works? I think that's something actually we shouldn't take for granted.
Oh, so masking, what it means is, say I have this shape, but I want to kind of like clip off the edges a bit. So what you can do is, let's say I want to use this square as a mask. So what I do is I select both of these and click on mask. And you see the circle only appears where it overlaps with the square, and that's masking. So in this case, I use that masking technique. So this bar only appears where it's overlapping with the screen, because you don't want these like little white bars like sticking out the side of the phone. It's going to look weird. So I only want it to appear on the top of the screen, and that's where masking was used.
Does that answer your question, Tiffany? Awesome.
Alrighty. Thanks for the question, though. Yeah, like masking does confuse a lot of people. All right, so moving on. Now I add a layer blur and make it really blurry like that, and tone down the opacity so it's not as extreme. And now I can see it looks like the phone is actually against like a wall or something. It looks a bit more convincing. Now let me finally group this. And as like a finishing touch, like this alone kind of looks more like an independent asset, not like an actual like art piece. So I guess a quick and easy way to make it look a bit more like an art piece is just to duplicate it. So it looks like one of those like iPhone ads where there's like a bunch of iPhones like flying around and they're like dancing together. So it looks a bit more like that. So I'm gonna duplicate it a few times. Actually, I just realized this looks kind of interesting, like when I overlay it like this. Ooh. Actually, no, it doesn't look as good. Never mind. Abort. And I'm going to also duplicate it to the top.
Smoky, I think there's a question in the chat about if you can go over how the layer blur mask hack. You did that to make the soft edge.
Yeah, okay, let me go back to that real quick. Okay, so let's say this is like a new phone, right? Like I'm making another phone from scratch. And this is like the front panel. Actually, that's kind of hard to see. Let me make it darker. This is the side and this is the front, right? So what I do is I first make a copy of the front like this. So like this. So now there's like two front panels. Let me change colors actually so it's easier to see. This is front panel red and front panel blue. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to blur the red one. So go to effects and layer blur. See, now it's all blurry. And I'm going to put it right over the blue one. Select both of them and hit mask. And see, so now red is only appears where the blue rectangle was. So now it looks like it has a blurry edge. And I think some of you might wonder, like, why can't you just, hold on, why can't you just like use get a red rectangle, blur it, and just put it like this? Like, isn't it the same thing? It is, but you also notice, like, see up here, the red blur kind of like creeps out the edge, it kind of like overflows. And it looks like, I don't know, the iPhone is like getting Thanos snapped or something. So to kind of have like a clear edge on parts that's not supposed to be like all fuzzy, that's why we want the mask. So if we use the mask version right here, you'll see that the edge looks fuzzy, but at the top and these sides, the edge is like really still crisp. It has like a clear contour, and it doesn't look like it's getting Thanos snapped. So that's the gist of it.
So does that answer your question, Kelly?
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome.
Right, awesome. It's like one last final thing. I'm going to add a background to this. Right now it's just pure white, but that doesn't look as pretty, I guess. So I'm going to make it a bluish color like this. Looks cool. Ooh. And that's it. So I'm done and the piece is complete. Now let's compare it with the one I made earlier, actually. Or never mind, I didn't bring it here, but yeah, so now it's done. Ta-da! And that's making an iPhone 12 from start to finish. And that concludes this workshop technically. So at this point, do you guys have any questions, any parts I want to kind of go more in detail, kind of like the masking thing I just did just now?
Like, even if it isn't a certain technique that he mentioned, it could be like a part that he made that you want to sort of go over again because you don't fully get. Like, I remember when I first watched Shimogi, there were a lot of parts I didn't get. So please speak up if you like have a little thing you want to sort of verify.
Also, in case, so real quick, so this was like where I practiced before I did the workshop. And if you use the techniques you run this workshop, you can actually also make this Apple Watch, which I highly recommend if you guys want to give yourself a challenge, because it uses a lot of the similar techniques, but it's like exponentially hard, and this took me forever to make. But it's one thing I want to just drop real quick.
Oh, Tomoki, we got a question.
Oh,
for the top
awesome.
part of the camera. How did you selectively choose the parts to curve the edges, like the gray part?
The gray part. Hold on, which part is that? Let me move the camera out.
So yeah, just zoom into the camera, I think.
Wait, which part was that again? Oh wait, this part you mean?
I think she means the camera, but like I think she means the reflective parts of the camera.
Oh, these?
Oh no, the camera itself. Like zoom in. You remember where you had the
these?
No, look at like the inner orb of the camera. You remember how you have the blue contours on the edge? I think that might be what she's talking about. I'm not sure. Tiffany, do you mind clarifying for a second?
These ones?
Yeah, is that what you?
Sorry, my internet, it's kind of like whack, but yeah, those parts, and also like the part where it's like I don't know how to describe it. You know where the top right and left corners. Yeah, I was just wondering, how did you selectively choose the parts to, I guess, curve to make like that connection to the rest of the frame? Is that that one?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So Figma has, I think it was called edit mode. So let's say you make a square like this. Let me Control Z to undo what I just did to the cameras and stuff. All right, so, okay, hold on. So Figma has this thing called edit mode. So this is an object, right? Like a regular square. If you double click it or click on edit object up here, it goes into this where like all the corners have like little dots, and you can individually select them like this. And if you click them while pressing shift, you can select multiple edges. And then you can either independently move these corners. I think they're technically called vertices. You can also round them off, which is I think what you were referring to, like this. So that's basically what I did. I just selected the top two corners in this case and just rounded them off.
Okay, I see. Thank you. That's really cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so we got another question from Max.
Alrighty.
Are there other versions of masks beside the inner joiny kind? Like, for example, they only appear when they're not in the other shape, or only include the parts of both that don't overlap. So like, yeah, I think I understand what he's asking here.
Yeah. Yes, of course, there's actually several. I'll demonstrate them now. So I'm going to make a red circle and a blue circle and duplicate them over. So the first one, I think you saw when I clicked on this menu earlier. So the first one is union, which combines the two into a single object. Copy. And the next one is subtraction. So this basically, I think in this case, yeah, it subtracts the blue from the red. So it's like red minus blue is like this crescent moon. And the next one is intersection, which basically only leaves the parts where the two shapes are intersecting. So that looks like a leaf. The final one is exclusion. I actually rarely use this, but as you can see, it leaves behind the parts that the two parts don't intersect. I think the most common ones are union and subtraction and maybe intersection. But yeah, it's these three that I use most frequently.
So I think like closest to Max's example would be the subtraction or the exclusion. But like apart from that, there is also like regular masking, which Tomoki used.
Yeah. I guess one masking and like intersection is like pretty much the same. So I'm not really too sure actually how to like decide which one to use over the other, but I guess it just depends on your mood.
All right, Maxwell, does that answer your question? Awesome, cool. So, do we have any other questions? Oh yeah, actually, Tomoki, I kind of have a question.
Oh,
yeah, just a small thing, but like, how do you sort of determine, do you have to decide from the beginning where your lighting is going to come from? And how do you make sure all of that keeps actually. How do you make sure all of that keeps consistent and throughout your design? Because there's so many different elements to keep track of.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. That's kind of did it implicitly, but I assume the light is coming from the top right in this graphic. And yeah, like Jemima just said, it's really important to like decide like which direction the light is coming from and kind of stick to it. Actually, for any lighting in general, it's kind of like a good idea before we begin to kind of like have a mental image of like where, like what the environment that the object is in. So like, for example, for this, I assumed that the phone, again, the light is coming from the top right. And I also assumed that it's like outdoors. So like the light is like slightly tinted blue because, you know, the sky is blue. There's like a slight tint to all lights because of the blue sky. So that's why if you remember when I made the shadows, I didn't make it gray. I made it like dark blue because again, I wanted to add the blue tint to it. And again, I assumed the light is coming from the top right. And that's why the shadow is on the bottom left because, you know, light is coming from top right to the bottom left. So shadows will naturally be on the bottom left. So those are like, yeah, definitely considerations you should make before you start a design.
Also, one more question, Tomoki, sorry. One of the things that like, this is more about like the bars for like that you use to denote lighting reflecting off the screen. What made you choose to have those become solid bars rather than just softening them or layer blurring them again? So how do you determine whether these kinds of lighting bars should be softer or like harsher or like, I guess, more sharp?
Good question, actually.
In order to like create sort of texture, is that it?
Yeah, okay, so a little physics lesson time. So let's say this is brown, the gray block is like a surface, right? And this that I just drew is like the sun or like the light source. So when light hits a surface, if the surface is really shiny, it like just reflects off the same angle, kind of like a laser beam. Meanwhile, if the surface is like really matte, so like not shiny, like it might be made of like clay or something, or it's metallic, but it's like really roughly polished, again, kind of like the new iPhone 12. What happens is when light hits the surface, it starts dispersing in all directions, like in a bunch of directions like this. So the effect that has on the lighting is that on smoother surfaces or like shiny ultra mirror surfaces, everything that's reflected looks really clear because again, light just bounces off in a straight line. Everything looks clear. Meanwhile, if the surface is really rough, I think the technical term is like in graphic design, like diffuse surface, light scatters in all directions. So the reflected image isn't as clear. It looks a lot more fuzzy and blurry. So the reason why I made like a block line right here, not like a blurry line, is because, you know, phone screens are supposed to be really polished and smooth and shiny, right? So that's why I made it really sharp. If for some reason, like, I don't know, like you dropped your phone in like sand or something and it's like, oh, the surface is all fuzzy, then yeah, like the bars should be kind of blurred to simulate like a rough surface, like this. Why is it not doing anything? Oh wait, hold on, I think I know why. Let me add an effect, and I guess it's kind of hard to tell, but like, see, when I make the lines blurry, the surface looks a lot less shiny, kind of. Whereas if I get rid of the blur, it looks really crisp and shiny. So
one
that's
looks more smooth than the other.
Does it?
Yeah, so like the sharp one looks more smooth. And then the,
yeah.
Okay.
That's also partially why, like, when I was doing the surface, like, if I think some earlier iterations of the iPhone had like a really shiny polished surface. If that was the case, I probably would have done the lighting like this. Because again, it's reflecting the surface. The surface is like a lot more shiny, which means whatever that's reflected is like a lot more clear, which means whatever that's in the reflection is like has a lot more crisp edge. So kind of simulate that out about like a lot more crisp borders. But since the new iPhone 12 has like a really diffuse, not so shiny surface, it's like polished aluminum, I made the transitions a bit more smooth to kind of make it look fuzzier and less shiny.
Thank you, Tomoki. Okay, yeah, we have one more question. So Tiffany's asking, unless you want to ask this in person, I can like also do it. But like, yeah, just jump in if you want to ask this. But like for colors, had you not referred to the iPhone model, like how would you usually choose what colors you're using, like your color palette?
Oh, so I guess in the case of ACM,
I think that's a great question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess in the case of ACM, like we usually just pick the color palette off the branding guidelines. But if I were like making like a free design on my own, actually, I think I wrote this down somewhere. Let's see if I don't know if I can remember it. I think what I wrote down was like, you first want to decide the mood of your artwork. Like, does it want to be like cheerful, like serious, scary, informative, like so on. For example, if you want to make something look cheery, like cheerful, you obviously want to use brighter colors and probably use like redder colors, like red, purple, orange, yellow, because you know those colors are usually associated with being lively and love and things like that. So based on that, like let's say I want to make this iPhone kind of have like a more wholesome vibe, because right now it looks a lot more serious. Like I think Kelly said, oh, is this like an ad for iPhone 12? Kind of has like a more serious vibe. But let's say if I wanted to make it a bit more wholesome, what I might first do is, again, wholesome usually has like a redder color palette. So as a starter, I'll make the background a bit more like reddish, orangish like this. And the shadows, instead of like blue, I'll make it a bit more purple. And you can already see it looks a lot more like heartwarming. So in short, the way to like a high level way to decide a color palette is to first decide what mood you want your artwork to be. And then from there, kind of like think, okay, what color expresses the mood I want to convey through my artwork? That's kind of at least the way I do it.
Actually, Tomoki, as a spin-off of that, how do you sort of understand sort of which colors go complementary to each color? Like you could have a number of colors that convey a certain mood, but when you combine too many of them together, it can feel chaotic. So like, how do you determine what like your combinations will be? For example, the way that you've used sort of a tealish turquoise, like light green alongside your blues, and like you've got blue that's more cool, blue that's more like sea or like sea greeny. You just got and like really dark navy as well. So how do you sort of create those pairings?
Well, I guess in this case, I just took it straight off of the original iPhone reference image, but I think in like more generally, you just kind of have to get used to it. Like for example, some color pairings, like say purple and green is like often said to be like a bad color combination. And you'll like, you can see why, like it just doesn't really go together as well. Whereas in like, I think red and purple, they're like, they usually look really nice when they're next to each other. I guess this is a bad example, but I think it's easier to see when you make a gradient, like a linear gradient like this. Let's say I go from red to purple. You know, it looks like one of those, it looks like Instagram or something. I think they use a lot of gradients like this. Whereas, and if I make a gradient from purple to green, it looks like really ugly. And as you make a lot of designs, you'll naturally come across these like bad color combinations. Some might not be as obvious as this, but you'll just look at it and think like, hey, the color seems a bit off. And over time, you kind of naturally learn like which colors work together well.
So it's an intuition based thing.
Yeah. Well, I guess intuition, and as a general rule of thumb, just a big disclaimer, general rule of thumb, colors that are right next to each other in the hue circle usually look good. So example, like green and blue, or like blue and dark blue and purple, purple and red. Those colors usually work together well. And you can actually also see this in the background. Like I think I made like a transition from like dark blue to light blue and then to green emerald. And if you look at the color on, if you look at the color on Figma, see dark blue, that's dark blue. And then right next to dark blue is light blue. And then right next to light blue, like right here, is emerald, which turned out to be like a nice color combination.
That's awesome, Tumoki. Thank you. So we have like 5 more minutes. So like, we're just going to get last questions in. If you guys have anything else you want to ask, just slide it in, whether that's through turning on your mic or just putting it in the chat.
And just to kind of give a plug for our club, if you want to learn in more detail how to make beautiful artwork like this, please join ACM Design. I can't really say it without like our president's permission, I guess, but we might recruit like designer positions. So if that ever happens, you'll get to learn how to make all these. There's like a really robust course that I made